on the street that we live? What's the noise like? What's the, students getting up at 8 a.m. or being in school rather by 7 or 8 a.m. It does feel like we have kind of set ourselves up to be a not very well rested society.
Right. And as Dr. Hale pointed out, really depends on your circumstance, how much is what proportion is under control. Because as you mentioned, there are a lot of things we can't necessarily control in terms of, the light pollution coming into the room, our job shift schedule, the time our kids have to get up for school. There's a lot of pressures put on our time. But again, those who are more advantaged have more control, usually more of an opportunity to work from home or not have to have the financial stresses that could increase sleep, or having to work multiple shifts, including overnight night shifts and then other shifts during the day. So versus people who have sort of better footing and are able to live in quieter neighborhoods, are going to inherently have more control over the enacting sort of sleep behavior. So one example, often you'll hear people talk about the temperature in your room, right? But be able to cool your room, especially if you live in a hot environment, fundamentally requires you have air conditioning or access to something where you can lower the temperature, which is a privilege for many people. So I think it's important when we think about how much control people have to realize that does vary quite substantially and can impact our sleep and how we actually approach helping those people.
Okay, so let's talk about some solutions now, because we did put this question to our listeners as well. What are they doing to try to get a better night's sleep? And here's what some of them had to say.
What do I do to help myself fall asleep and then stay asleep? Well, there's basically 3 things. The first one is a great mattress. The second is a cool room. Third is a very structured sleep routine, which I start about 1 hour before I go to sleep.
Things like keeping the bedroom cold at 62 degrees, taking magnesium supplements, trying to avoid screens an hour or 2 before bedtime.
I find that a melatonin that is a delayed release works really well.
Cannabis is now legal, and I take a hybrid edible that helps me sleep.
If you do these movements with your eyes closed, you move your eyeballs all the way up, all the way down, then all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and then you do like a circle. 90% of the time, I'll fall back to sleep within 5 minutes.
And then if I wake up in the middle of the night, I get out of bed, I go out on my balcony with a sweater, sit outside, breathe the air, look out at the night sky, and eventually I then say enough is enough, and then I go back to bed and I fall asleep.
Those were On Point listeners Barb and Peter from Massachusetts, Anne from New Mexico, Elizabeth also from Massachusetts, and David from Connecticut. Dr. Burdish, what did you hear in that kind of laundry list of things that people are out there trying to help them sleep better?
So what I hear are very common techniques that we know multiple people use.
Mm-hmm. The eye one was new to me, I have to say. The closed eye movements.
That was one I hadn't heard before, but I've always hear of things that I never think about. But we did hear a lot of the more common ones in terms of supplements that people take of various formats, melatonin, over-the-counter sleep medications, dietary supplements such as magnesium. There's always sort of a hot thing.
And do these hot things work? Are these things that you might recommend to people to try, like melatonin and magnesium?
So in my clinical practice, I rarely recommend those things. Again, it depends on the circumstance, because most patients who actually make it to the Brigham Sleep Clinic have tried all these things, so we see the patients that fail all of these treatments. So when I hear all these different listeners from around the country, it really shows the extent and pervasiveness of sleep difficulties have, right? Because the vast majority of people suffering from sleep problems are going out there and buying stuff, putting things in their body, using different techniques, talking to their friends, trying to figure out what works. And it's hard to think about any other problems in medicine where people are turning so much to each other to try to get the answers and information. And when I think and I think one issue is that there's also almost nothing, we all sleep. As humans, we have a biological imperative to sleep. And I think most of us are experts when it comes to our own sleep, but don't realize that what works for you may not help for your friend and neighbor. And I think it's fine for people to give each other advice on that, but I have issues where some of these things are perhaps not safe for people.
Yeah, and you've also studied prescription sleep medications, which with all of these kind of self-medicating solutions that we just heard about, I don't feel like I've heard as much about lately. And I wonder if we know if these prescription sleep medications actually work and are safe. Do we know enough about them?
So interestingly, we know more about some prescription sleep medications than others. And we certainly probably know more about them than how dietary supplements work. So again, something like magnesium we hear a lot about, there's very little evidence supporting that works for sleep. But as people are using that safely, then it's okay. As far as prescription medications for sleep, that's actually interesting because we think about medications that actually have been studied in clinical trials to answer questions: do these medications work for sleep, and are they also safe? So there's groups of medications that fall into that category. And then there's many other medications that are prescription medications, though they came to market for other indications, the most common one being trazodone. Trazodone has very limited data. There's some studies going on now where we're going to have more information as to whether or not trazodone is helpful for people to sleep, but we do also worry about safety. It's just easier to prescribe than some of the other sleep medications. As far as the prescription sleep medications, we heard a lot about that over recent years because the most commonly used prescription medication for insomnia is a medication called Zolpidem, is the generic name. The brand name is Ambien. And that recently, in that class of medications, had a black box warning because people, when they take it can produce the adverse effect of people doing things in their sleep driving, sleepwalking, and people died from using the sleep medications. So they got this black box warning. So we know that Zolpidem use from some of the work that we've done, and I've done along with Dr. Jenna Wong, is to show that Ambien prescriptions have gone down over the past several years.
Well, I'm also thinking back to Dominique, who we heard from at the top of the hour, who it sounds like she's had 23 years of bad sleep and has not even made it to the phase of maybe trying one of these, or she tried one of these medications and doesn't use it anymore. And so it leads me to think about this as the public health crisis that we started out talking about. And I wonder if we just don't consider sleep to be this third pillar of health in the way that we think of diet and exercise. Are doctors not having the right conversation with their patients, or enough of the conversation with their patients, to make us all take this more seriously?
I think it's well known that sleep is often left out of the conversations, and I don't think that that's the doctor's fault per se. I think there's limited training and education for any clinician on sleep in general. I also think the way we're forced to practice medicine now in terms of 10, 15-minute appointments with competing with lots of other chronic medical illnesses, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, there's honestly, frankly, not enough time to address all of the relevant health issues. So sleep is a pillar of health. It's recommended by Good Sleep by the American Heart Association now as one of the AHA 8 lifestyle measures. But again, we're far from having it embedded within our routine clinical practices.
Ooh, okay. Well, a lot to think about here. Dr. Suzanne Burdish, she's an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and clinical director of behavioral sleep medicine at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Dr. Burdish, thank you so much for coming in and helping us try to all sleep a little better tonight and every night.
Thanks so much for having me, and I hope you have a good night's sleep.
I hope you do too, and I hope all of you listening out there have a very restful weekend. I'm Amory Sievertson. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the Draper Richards Kaplan Foundation, with a mission to find, fund, and support social enterprises committed to solving some of the world's most pressing problems. Learn more at drkfoundation.org. And the Marotra Institute for Business, Markets, and Society, hosting the Is Business Broken podcast, featuring conversations with academics, industry leaders, and politicians. More at ibms.bu.edu.
This is KUOW FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham, a self-sustaining service of the University of Washington. It's just about noon and almost time for Week in Review. Here's host Bill Radke with a preview.
Who's the mayor? Who knows? Who's the county executive? Well, we have some idea, but we do know some things about the election that just ended this week. So we'll discuss and debate what the voters were saying and how the Seattle area is likely to change or not. Oh, and we'll end the show with what made us smile this week. That's what we do. What you do, I pray, is stay tuned.
KUOW is proud to support the community. This month highlighting Seattle Humane's Warm Hearts, Full Bellies Pet Food Drive. Their Oogie's Ohana Pet Food Bank provides nearly 1 million meals a year of donated pet food to families and food banks throughout the region. More information on how to help at seattlehumane.org/petfoodbank.
Hi, I'm Monica Nicholsberg, co-host of KUOW's economy podcast, Booming. When it comes to the white-collar workforce, warning signals are blinking red. On the latest episode, with AI shaking up the labor force, could trade schools be the new ticket to the American dream? Find Booming on the KUOW app or wherever you listen.
Support for KUOW comes from Pacific Crest Montessori School. With a Fremont campus and a farm on Vashon, teachers are committed to helping students expand their independence, grow in critical thinking, and discover renewed joy in learning. More info about current admission events at pacificcrest.org.
Global pop star Rosalia is back with a new album, and it's her most ambitious yet, featuring 13 different languages.
I love people realizing that pop music can be great art, and that's something that's happening here.
I'm Juana Summers. NPR's Stephen Thompson reviews Rosalia's sprawling new record looks. That's on All Things Considered from NPR News.
All Things Considered coming up this
Support for KUOW.
Coming up this afternoon between 3 and 6 p.m. here on KUOW with news with Kim Malcolm. It's 55 degrees and see the sun outside the studios of KUOW. Mostly sunny skies throughout the weekend. Slight chance of rain, but it's currently 54.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. On day 38 of the government shutdown, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer told Republicans Democrats would back a GOP measure to reopen the government if they agree to a one-year extension of health insurance tax credits.
Democrats would like to see an end to this shutdown, and we want to respect Leader Thune's desire not to negotiate on ACA until after the government reopens. Therefore, we'd like to offer a simple proposal that would reopen the government and extend the ACA premium tax credits simultaneously.
Schumer on the Senate floor today. The chamber has held 14 failed votes on reopening the government. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has said the GOP-led Senate would vote on a Republican bill to pay federal workers during the shutdown. So far, they have been unable to overcome Democratic opposition. President Trump's pressing Senate Republicans to scrap the filibuster.
I am totally in favor of terminating the filibuster, and we would be back to work within 10 minutes after that vote took place, and lots of other good things would happen. And it doesn't make any sense that a Republican would not want to do that.
The president at the White House, where he was hosting Hungarian leader Viktor Orban. President Trump says his administration is considering sparing the government of his close ally, Orban, from U.S. sanctions on Russian oil.
We're looking at it because it's very difficult for him to get the oil and gas from other areas. As you know, they don't have the advantage of having sea. It's a great country. It's a big country, but they don't have sea. They don't have the ports.
But the U.S. targeted Russian oil to pressure President Vladimir Putin of Russia to end its war with Ukraine. Airlines are offering fewer flights beginning today because of the ongoing shutdown of the federal government. NPR's Joel Rose says the Federal Aviation Administration ordered a reduced flight capacity to ensure safety amid staffing shortages at airports.
United, Delta, and American have begun canceling hundreds of flights. The FAA officially released a list of 40 major airports that will be affected by the reductions, including airline hubs in Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, and elsewhere. David Kinzelman, a senior vice president at United, told NPR's All Things Considered that the airline will adjust.
We have service disruptions frequently in the airline business, so we've got a good playbook.
The FAA has already been delaying flights at some airports because of staffing shortages among air traffic controllers. Those controllers are required to work without pay during the shutdown, but some have taken on second jobs and many are calling out sick. Joel Rose, NPR News, Washington.
At last check on Wall Street, the Dow was up 27 points at 46,939. The S&P was down slightly. The Nasdaq was off 95 points. From Washington, this is NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Paige Browning in Seattle. Violent crime is way down so far this year in Seattle. A report from the Major Cities Chiefs Association shows that homicides fell by nearly 50% through September compared with the same period last year. There were 24 homicides over that time in the city, down from 47 in 2024. That's the third biggest decrease among major cities covered in the report. Federal assistance to help people keep the heat on this winter is in limbo with the federal government shutdown. The lack of funding is forcing some states to turn applicants away now. Here in Washington, help is still available for people having trouble heating their homes. Angela Griffin heads the Seattle Bird Bar Place. The nonprofit helps about 6,000 households keep the heat on using federal funds.
This year, before we even opened our door, we had already an influx of people coming in with their applications in larger numbers than we have had historically.
State officials say leftover federal dollars from last year are available for energy assistance to low-income households, and the state has started its own home heating program. That program's funded by the state's auctions of carbon permits that Washington's biggest polluters are required to purchase. Sound Transit's going to shut down part of the One Line tomorrow. A reminder that officials say service between the U District and Westlake will be suspended November 8th so crews can do maintenance and two-line integration work. Shuttle buses will be provided to get riders around the closure. And a King County jury has awarded $8 million to a former Seattle Public School student who was punched in the face by his math teacher. Today's verdict comes after 3 days of deliberations. The Seattle Times reports the jury found the school district was responsible for the injuries the student suffered in 2018 after he was hit by teacher James Johnson. This is KUOW.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Hi, I'm Bill Radke. The voters have spoken. And here to interpret their message with me is Seattle Times City Hall reporter, co-host of the Seattle News, Views, and Brews podcast, David Kroman. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Also, the co-founder and publisher of PubliCola and co-host of the Seattle Nice podcast, Erica Barnett. Welcome back.
Good to be here.
And the founder and president of Gamoran Legal Consulting and host of the podcast Better Call Saul. Is that true?
No, Bill, that's not true.
All right. Saul Gamoran, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Ran the Nikki Haley's Washington State presidential campaign some time back. Just, I could go on and on about things you've done in your life, but that's a couple. Oh, we're live streaming the show, by the way. You can watch this happening on YouTube. Just search KUOW Public Radio. You'll find it. And if you find that you enjoy seeing your radio friends instead of just hearing us, then come out to Town Hall Seattle on Thursday night, December 4th. We're going to toast and or curse the year 2025 at our annual Year in Review show. Again, Year in Review, December 4th, Town Hall. Go to KUOW.org/events and get your tickets. Who will be Seattle's mayor in January? We don't know. Who will be King County's executive in January? We probably know, but they're still counting votes. This show is happening live at noon on Friday. The next official tally comes at, is it 4 o'clock?
3:34.
3:30? Yeah. So we're going to stay on the air for the next 4 hours.
Yes.
Like the Jerry Lewis telethon. Will they count all the votes by today or not until next week? Or what?
50,000 more today, probably another 50 or 60,000 after that in Seattle. 100,000 countywide today.
We're basically a day behind where we would ordinarily be.
Yeah. Which is, it's not that big a deal, right? Ultimately, it's going to be who it's going to be. It's, yeah. But, well, for you, Journo, you know, for like, you're knee deep in this stuff. Are you stressed out?
No, not stressed out, but I do get a little tired of writing the same story every day, which is new results, still don't know.
I enjoy it because it gives me an opportunity to practice my math skills. So I genuinely enjoy the number crunching part of it. So, I'm not stressed.
That's a silver lining.
Not in the least.
Well, here's what we can do. I think we can still have an interesting show. First of all, Mayor Bruce Harrell, leads Katie Wilson by about 10,000 votes. Last we checked, with 100,000 left to count. Those late votes tend to favor the more progressive candidate, so that margin will probably tighten up. King County Executive candidate Gurmai Zahalai is leading Claudia Balducci by 3,500 votes. Whichever way these go, this election was generally a win for progressives. David, why would Seattleites, for example, elect a relatively conservative city attorney and city council member who becomes a city council president and then just ditch them? Why?
Well, I think 2021 and 2023, which were the two elections that really swept in the kind of, quote, more moderate version of City Hall, you know, for my money, they were just really of the moment, which was coming out of the pandemic, following up on the protests, and the Seattle Police Department was losing huge number of officers. Just the state of things in Seattle looked, I think, dire to some people. A lot of downtown was still deserted. There was just a lot of sort of general disorder. And so I think people, and, you know, at the time, City Hall, when a lot of this was unfolding, was a very left-wing progressive City Hall. And I think people just, you know, the pendulum swings. I think this pendulum had just swung back the other direction pretty hard, and people wanted to change the direction.
So this is the norm.
I think so.
Return to the mean.
That was the kind of question of this election, which is what is you know, was that the exception? Were the last 4 years the exception to the rule, or was this kind of the new normal of Seattle? You know, I will point out that though those 21 and the 23 elections, the moderate candidates did a lot better, the vote margins were still relatively small. So as far as total votes go, it wasn't like the entire city of Seattle changed direction, but it was enough to bring in this slate of candidates. I think what we're seeing now is a lot of the issues that dominated 21 and 23 are not quite as top of mind. I don't think people believe that the police are still being defunded. I don't think they will be defunded. You know, crime.
Footnote, never were defunded.
Never were defunded, and Bruce Harrell says that they will be if Katie Wilson wins.
But, you know, the number of officers joining the police department is climbing, and so I think people's priorities shifted, and there's polling to show that. You know, in 21, the top priority was public safety by like 65%. Now it's a much more kind of hodgepodge mix of issues. Public safety is still one, but affordability has really climbed, and so you just kind of see this more diverse set of priorities among voters. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people kind of just identify it as being progressive voters and have come back to that. We could probably get into Trump too and his effect here, but there's a lot to unpack.
Others? By the way, hodgepodge is a great word. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all right. I think we do have pendulum swings. I also think, to give, some credit to Seattle voters, I think that they have looked at the city council that was ushered in 2023 when, we've had a lot of turmoil on the city council, but 6 seats have flipped. And I think that people are seeing that there is not a lot of progress on the things that particular tranche of city council people, came in as centrists saying, we're going to fix the budget. We're going to crack down on, on too much spending. The budget has gotten out of control. We're going to address homelessness in a meaningful and compassionate way. And I think people can see that those things aren't happening. And I also think that affordability has become such an issue for people. The city is now, as we've discussed before, it's majority renter, and people are seeing their rents, go up beyond reason. And I think, the promise of change, quote unquote, that came in 2021 and 2023 has not been realized. And so I think now people are saying, well, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe let's go back in the other direction. But these pendulum swings are eternal. I've been covering City Hall since 2001, and we go back and forth. There's never radical change in Seattle from, within the same kind of socialist to centrist bounds. We've moved to the left over the years, but I think we'll see another conservative shift in the future.
Well, Bill, I would respectfully disagree with your characterization of Ann Davison and Sarah Nelson as conservatives. I would say they're both.
I think I said relatively conservative. I hope I said that. Go on.
All right. Well, I'm sure you did.
It's all relative in Seattle.
All right. I think they're both are liberals, but they're not leftists.
Right.
And I think in the case of Sarah Nelson is actually different than Ann Davison, because Ann Davison, I think, did an excellent job. And anyone who spends time in the city sees, things are better than they were before. But Sarah Nelson, I think, got into fracas with the city council that I think hurt her. And I think with Mayor Harrell, look, I've looked at the numbers. I think Katie Wilson's going to win this race, but I think you're right. It's going to be a razor thin. And the question is, why did Harrell do better than the other two? In my opinion, is he stopped pounding on, the defund the police and really focused on, she's not experienced. I think that resonated with some voters more than trying to say we're going to take you back to, pre-pandemic times.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody was saying we're going to take you back to pre-pandemic times. I think that Bruce Harrell had an extremely negative campaign pretty much from the primary on. And in the last month, his attacks on Katie Wilson, which I think have been pretty disingenuous and misleading in a lot of cases, I think have been effective. I believe it or not, do know a few normie people who are not deeply entrenched in this stuff. And I heard concerns about Katie Wilson's experience. How
could you not be concerned about the lack of experience of someone who hasn't run any city, much less a major
that's kind of
world-class city.
That's kind of been the situation with a lot of our mayors in the past. It's not as though every single mayor that we've had is like Bruce Harrell, a lifetime politician. I understand that, but I also think that Harrell's specific attacks, sort of suggesting, again, disingenuously, that she's never had a real job, that she gets all this money from her parents, that she's this elitist person. I think that those did have an effect. And I think that Katie Wilson, on the other hand, didn't strike back. And I think that there were lots of things that you could attack Bruce Harrell on if you wanted to, including a lot of the coverage by KUOW. And she just decided that she wasn't going to run that kind of campaign, and I think it hurt her.
I'm not sure that she made that decision or she didn't have the money. He had a lot more money than she did.
Right. That's possible. Yeah, I talked to somebody in, who had done some door knocking for Katie Wilson today, and I'd asked them, were you surprised that the results of the general election were that much worse than the primary? And this person said no, because they had been at the doors, and they, so there are people who are in Katie Wilson's orbit who kind of anticipated that maybe she wouldn't do as well, and anticipated that these attacks on experience and her kind of general persona, the Harrell campaign attacks on that persona, were having an effect. And so I think even within the Wilson campaign, they're not altogether surprised that she did worse than she did in the primary.
I want to pick up on something that Erica and Saul said. I'm curious your take, David. Erica, you said that you think voters looked and decided the current government hadn't really done much or done enough when it comes to budget, spending cuts, homelessness, affordability. And then Saul, you said you think voters can plainly see. You said things are better than they were. So are
in terms of public safety.
Public safety. So meaning, why do you say that? Why are things so much better in terms of public safety?
Well, look, Seattle had 50% less homicides, for example, in 2024 through September, 24 instead of 47. You walk down the street, there's less panhandlers. You can go to Nordstrom's and not step over bodies and things like this. And I attribute a lot of that.
Why do you think that is?
I think because Ann Davidson did a really good job. She cleared the entire backlog of cases, and I think she did a good job. And she also had people that weren't allowed to go to areas where they were promoting prostitution, where they were caught there. And I just think...
But are you saying voters didn't notice that, or they didn't give her any credit?
No, I think Erica's right in that I think that the affordability issue was a bigger deal. People were not thinking front of mind of public safety like they were 4 years ago.
Okay.
And I think affordability became more important.
Well, I think that I would not credit Ann Davison with eliminating homelessness or public drug use. The soda orders, which are about drug use, they're banishment orders from different parts of the city for people accused of using drugs. There's only been a few of them so far, and she has not prosecuted many of them for violating those orders. Soap orders, similar thing. I mean, I don't think that there is evidence, if you go up on Aurora, that these orders are actually decreasing the amount of demand for sex work. And so I would not say that people would be right to vote for her or to have voted for her based on that. And I also think, clearing the backlog, PubliCola has written a lot about this. Ann Davison is no better on prosecutions than her predecessors, largely for structural reasons.
When you say better, you mean more prosecution?
Yeah, I'm saying from the perspective of prosecuting serious crimes like DUI, like domestic violence, things like that.
But I was saying that she cleared a backlog of 5,000 cases. Are you saying she didn't clear a backlog?
She did clear backlog, and as PubliCola reported, that was mostly by dismissing those cases. So yes, she did dismiss a ton of cases after she came in, but that doesn't mean that those people were prosecuted, jailed, et cetera. What happens with these soda orders and soap orders is sometimes people will go to jail and they stay there for a night, a couple nights, 3 nights. We pay for that, and then they're out. And so I don't think that's been a very effective strategy. But I also think that you can go to lots of parts of the city and see, what you were calling bodies on the street. You can see people suffering from drug addiction. Go to 12th and Jackson. That isn't any better.
Okay, so we'll get into affordability, but since we're talking about, we've mentioned drugs, crime, prostitution, David, if Katie Wilson becomes mayor, what would you expect her administration and the council she has to do any differently regarding public safety, public order?
I think those stay out areas that both Saul and Erica talk about, I think those could be repealed or just largely unenforced, or at least it would not be a priority coming out of City Hall. That was a pretty clear, we look for kind of wedge issues in city politics. That was a pretty clear one, that there was one group of politicians who was saying, I support these orders or these zones, another group that was saying, I don't think they're effective.
But is there some groundswell of voters rallying, let people back in areas of prostitution? Like what?
No, again, I think to Saul's point, I don't think, if Katie Wilson wins, I don't think it will be because of public safety or what she said about public safety. I think it will be what she has said predominantly about affordability and taxing and taxation and taxing the rich, taxing corporations. I think that was her kind of primary message that resonated with people.
Okay, so I want to talk about money in a moment. I just want to know: are you saying that you don't? So from the point of view of someone listening to us, we'll talk about money in a moment. But if they're wondering about drug markets or tent encampments or shoplifting prosecutions, would they expect, here we are, we don't know who's going to be mayor? Is there something at stake? Are we going to see a different Seattle if it's Bruce Harrell again, or if it's Katie Wilson on public safety?
I think probably. Because
how so?
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to emphasis. What you think of as the top priority. Harrell, last campaign and this campaign and during his mayor's office, has really hammered on the sort of visual of having people sleep outside and be in parks, and that should not be a thing that people in Seattle should have to deal with. Wilson, despite some of the kind of images of her as, whatever, Shama Sawant Part 2, or however you want to describe it, has been pretty nuanced on this issue. She has not ruled out clearing encampments from parks or clearing encampments from the streets, but her emphasis is less on the visual of it and more on what kind of money and resources are we going to put at this problem so that we come up with some long-term fix. And you can debate, I think there's a debate to be had about whether that's just kind of actually going to solve the problem in any sort of near-term way. But again, and I think that is a change from where the kind of progressive left in Seattle is now as compared to, say, 2020, 2021, is they've moderated a lot on public safety. You don't hear anybody talking about cutting police department budgets, despite, Katie Wilson did support budgets in 2020 that would have cut the police department. Now she's saying, that's not on the table. I want to keep hiring officers. At one point, she even said she would probably consider keeping Chief Sean Barnes, Mayor Harrell's police chief, on. I think that probably has changed in recent months, in part because of some stuff Erica's written about. But, there is, again, so we don't hear any sort of sweeping pronouncements of I'm going to stop hiring police or I'm going to make this wholesale change. But it's where do you think public safety, the best answer for public safety comes from? And I think from a Harrell administration, we're hearing more about it comes from the police department, it comes from enforcement. Mm-hmm. From the Wilson side, we're hearing more. It comes from alternatives, it comes from treatment, it comes from housing, that sort of thing.
And money. Yes, Erica.
Well, I also think, and don't get me wrong, I think these are two very different candidates with very different visions for public safety and how it looks in Seattle. Mayors have a certain amount of control over that that is not that great. And I'll just point to the fact that Bruce Harrell says that public safety has improved dramatically over his term, but I would say that's a structural thing. Harrell came in, and as he points out all the time, he inherited the situation where COVID had just ravaged the city. We've been in lockdowns. A bunch of cops had left, largely over, or partly over mask mandates, things like that. And so he inherited that. He had nowhere to go but up. And so he takes credit, as I would too if I was mayor and running for office, but he takes credit for all the positive change that has happened compared to the absolute lowest point in Seattle's modern history on, the number of encampments that were out, invisible in the streets and the number of police officers. So, things will happen during the term of whoever is mayor that will impact, the perceived public safety in Seattle. I do think policy really matters, but I don't think it can totally swing, what are often and almost always national trends. Cops were leaving departments all over the country, as I've pointed out a bunch of times. We are not an island, and so national factors also just will always play in. It's never like the mayor flips a switch and public safety, means one thing or the other.
The one piece, though, where I would say that maybe Harrell's administration did matter in that front is on the contract negotiations with the police union. They came out very well in both rounds with the the Seattle Police Officers Guild. So this is the largest police union in the city. They always run a really tough negotiation because they kind of understand that they're not going anywhere, but mayors come and go. So they're pretty good at standing their ground. So they came out really well. First, a year ago, they became the highest paid officers in the state. And then again, in the last just couple weeks, they got yet another raise. So, if you're a recruit joining the police department, you can now make almost $120,000 right off the bat, which is by far the most paid in the state. And so, I do have some questions about if Katie Wilson's administration is at that bargaining table, how does that come out differently? And there is a pretty clear line that you can draw from when those raises happened to when hiring at the police department picked up. So, I think that for me is the easiest solution is Seattle police officers before January 2025 were, I don't remember the exact number. It was like 30th best paid in the state. And then they became the best paid. And then, surprise, suddenly a lot more officers want to work for the Seattle Police Department. So I think if there is one kind of specific piece, and I do agree with Erica that I think there's large systemic forces at play, and you can just look at national data to find those. But I think it does matter that Harrell's administration greenlit those raises. And I don't know what that would have looked like under an administration like Katie Wilson's.
Maybe a little more accountability.
Right.
Well, I'm sure glad he did it. We need to pay those officers a decent wage.
Well, now let's talk about money, because obviously these are not really two separate topics. So again, we don't know who's going to be mayor. We have a little bit of information about, we have Eddie Lynn winning that council seat. We have Erica Evans and Deion Foster winning their races. We talked a little about those. What can we expect from a new city government, whether it's Wilson or Harrell, in terms of taxing and spending?
I think there's not much question that there's going to be new taxes, new wealth taxes, and maybe higher B&O taxes in Seattle. I mean, I think that's something that she hasn't shied away from. And I think that resonated with the public. Seattle is a very left-wing city, and many people look at places like Amazon as kind of the enemy instead of a producer of jobs, and they're more than happy to raise the headcount. I think you're going to see companies moving to Bellevue.
Your question is about what are we going to see out of the new city government on taxes and spending. I mean, the city.
And in the case of mayor, what's at stake?
Well, the city has passed 2 new taxes already this year. The sales tax increase, ostensibly for public safety, although it's, as I've written, it's kind of a slush fund for anything, like all taxes are now. And then they also, or voters actually, just raised the business and occupation tax on big businesses. I mean, I actually do agree that, we have seen with Jumpstart that those jobs moving out of Seattle have affected the amount of money the city has to spend.
That's the payroll tax.
That's the payroll tax that is primarily or largely on Amazon. But I think that, in the near term, the city just doesn't have a lot of extra money to spend, and they're going to be dealing with massive cuts from the federal government to particularly things like housing and shelter. I don't want to get too into the weeds on all that, but the city's going to have to make up funding for a lot of stuff that we have relied on the federal government for. So I don't think we're going to see a ton of new spending on programs. I think that the police budget actually could become an issue because they are hiring so fast now that they could end up getting too many applications. I don't know how soon that's going to happen, but I think that will happen. So they just don't have a lot of leeway right now. And I think if Katie Wilson gets elected, that's going to be a huge challenge. But I do think capital gains tax is certainly a possibility that's on the table. It just won't raise that much money.
Because I mean the Seattle voters' willingness and even desire to tax rich people and corporations is kind of the theme of this last year. It's why Katie Wilson ran for mayor in the first place. She wasn't really thinking about it. And then in February, we had this vote because we have this social housing developer now and it needed money. And so there was a vote. Should we tax high-paying companies to help fund that social housing developer, or should we try and spend the money that we already have to scale them up? Voters overwhelmingly went with the new tax. It was not close at all. Mayor Harrell's face was on the alternative, the spend the money we have option, and that is what essentially left a lane open for Katie Wilson. She recognized, and I think rightly, that I think Seattle voters are probably in some ways more nuanced than people assume. I think they largely want a police department that is staffed up and is responsive, and they also want to tax corporations and rich people. And I think that's why her campaign was what it was, which was looking at the results of that vote, which was overwhelmingly in favor of the new tax, and sort of hammering on that through the whole way. And to Mayor Harrell's credit, he recognized that too. It's why he proposed this B&O tax. I can't remember if it was just before or just after the primary, but it was around.
I think it was just after.
Just after. And, I think that was a sort of recognition that this is a winning issue in Seattle politically, that it is almost impossible to lose at the ballot if your proposal involves more taxes on Amazon, essentially.
I mean, I voted against that tax.
There you go. Okay, explain why.
Well, because I don't like the way that the city council is using tax dollars as a slush fund. And when we have taxes that are ostensibly for one purpose, using them for basically any purpose, I just, I knew the tax was going to pass, but my household voted against it for that reason. I like to think that when we pass a library levy or an education levy or a veterans and human services levy, that it actually goes to that purpose. And I think this current city council and mayor are budgeting in a way that we really have no assurance of that, and it sets a really bad precedent.
Which is probably about the most nuanced opposition in the city.
Yeah. One more question before we take a break. If Katie Wilson, and I'm hearing, are any of you, what's the guess as to who's the mayor in January?
I'm not going on record with that.
Oh boy.
I'm guessing Katie Wilson will be the next mayor.
Okay. Katie Wilson, and to
Abstentions.
Abstentions.
I'm
Okay.
abstaining.
So if Katie Wilson's the new mayor, and as we said, all the other election results and the will of the voters, who thinks that we would tax the wealthy so much that it would, again, our listeners would notice the difference because the tax revenues would dry up, or services would get funded, shelters and beds and subsidies, and or that businesses would leave and there'd be cardboard, there'd be businesses shuttered, restaurants would close because there's no foot traffic. What is at stake in this mayoral campaign when it comes to taxing the wealthy? How big an effect would it have on the city?
I think it's going to be impossible to tease apart the effect. I mean, I think it's going to be the perfect environment for anyone to argue their own narrative because AI is already clearly having an effect on tech companies. Amazon just announced it's laying off 14,000, probably up to 30,000 corporate employees. That's probably, we don't know how many of them are in Seattle or Bellevue. It's probably a good number. And so, it's going to be hard to, I think it's like almost likely that these large tech companies in Seattle contract in size over the next few years. Whether or not that is because of new taxation coming out of City Hall is going to be the fight of the next election, probably.
I would go to the next step and I would say, of course, the layoffs are going to impact the economy tremendously, in my opinion. But will these new taxes result in some business leaving? Absolutely. Just like more police officers applied when the salaries went up, this will have an effect on businesses leaving.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about new taxes after the mayor's race, I just don't think that there are huge opportunities left at this point for progressive taxation. I mean, we can tweak some of the levers, but as I said, the employee hours tax jumpstart is not bringing in as much as it was anticipated to and as it used to. So I think Bruce Harrell, perhaps anticipating he was going to lose, I don't know. But I think he set up a lot of taxes and also this, massively generous police contract on the way out the door, or at least going perhaps into a second term, where, there's just not a lot of room. And we have the highest sales tax in the country. And I mean, we have an absurdly high sales tax at this point. It's incredibly expensive to buy anything. And the business and occupation tax has already gone up. They're not going to propose another one. I mean, maybe they will. David, I don't know if you've heard
not
different,
that I've heard,
no. But there's not a lot of wiggle room in the next year for massive new taxes to fix some of the problems that we're going to see.
They'll find a way.
Let's pause there. That's Saul Gamoran. That was Erica Barnett. David Kroman. I'm Bill Radke. We're going to be back in a moment with more of what happened this week on Week in Review. Don't go away.
Support for KUOW comes from Eco Design and Maintenance, family-owned and specializing in start-to-finish exterior design using materials and methods that help to reduce environmental impact. From landscapes to hardscaping, outdoor spaces designed to be functional and long-lasting. More at eco-seattle.com.
Support for KUOW's car donation program comes from local Kia dealers. The Sportage Hybrid offers a mix of SUV versatility, hybrid fuel efficiency, and technology features like a dual panoramic curved display. More at kia.com.
You're listening to Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke. We've been talking, of course, about the election here with PubliCola's Erica Barnett and the Seattle Times' David Kroman and Saul Gamoran Legal Consulting. And there's something that I want to know if you think it is election related, something that happened the morning after Election Day. Seattle's police chief fired two of the department's top civilian leaders, the chief operating officer and the general counsel. Does that have anything to do with the election?
Well, I reported the story on PubliCola, and the Seattle Times also had a piece about it. And yeah, I mean, 7:30 in the morning, the day after the election, was when the calls went out to the general counsel and the COO of SPD, telling them that their services were no longer needed, pack their things and go home. So yeah, I mean, I think when you time something for the instant after an election, it definitely seems related. And whether that is, I mean, my read of that is that, either, and Bruce Harrell's office unusually did not return any of my calls or questions about this, but So to speculate based on the timing, either Bruce Harrell knew about it but told Sean Barnes to hold off, or did not know about it, and the police chief held off until the day after the election because this news, I mean, I think it kind of hit with a thud publicly because I don't think people pay a whole lot of attention to civilian positions. But, I mean, it could be unflattering to the mayor potentially to have this come out before the election.
What's the big deal?
So again, I mean, this did not make a huge splash, but I think the theory might be that these are two key veteran positions. Barnes has come in from Wisconsin and brought a lot of people with him who don't know the city of Seattle. These are folks who were, in some cases, trying to advise Barnes on some decisions, and their advice was not taken. And so I just think that it could contribute to the sense that there's a bit of chaos at the police department right now, and that big decisions are getting made that, may very well be in the interest of SPD, but it's just a lot of churn. And coming on the heels of, the fact that Barnes appointed this guy, Mike Tejan, as head of the East Precinct, even though he is infamous in Seattle for his actions in 2020. He drove up onto a sidewalk with a crowd of protesters and called them cockroaches after they scattered. So he appointed this guy as head of that precinct and got a lot of blowback. I broke that news on PubliCola. So, I think stability is probably what the sense that Harrell would want to create before an election.
I have a different perspective. I think, number one, it is implausible that the mayor did not know about this ahead of time. I have no evidence. I'm just suggesting that I think it's not likely you do this without informing the mayor. Second thing is, I think the leading reason to do it probably is to try to save his job under Katie Wilson. She hasn't really committed one way or the other. I don't think she's going to keep him, but I think he's trying to save his job. And by doing this, he thinks it might help him save his job.
How so?
Well, these are holdovers from a prior time. They were very involved with the consent decree and all that stuff. And I think he's trying to clear the decks and show that he's open to change.
Anything more to say?
Yeah, I mean, for all we were talking before about, the increased hiring at the police department, the top floor of the police department has been kind of in utter chaos for much of Harrell's term between, he kind of inherited Adrian Diaz as an interim chief and then gave him the permanent job, and there were questions about his qualifications. And then, of course, KUOW wrote a lot about this, but there was, a lot of lurid rumors about relationships and affairs, and the whole thing just fell apart, and people in the top department sort of suing each other, and allegations of sexual harassment and racism, and it would just became, and then now Adrian Diaz, the former chief, sued the city for $10 million. It was just the really chaotic time, and the kind of hope with Barnes is that you bring some stability here. And so, again, I also don't know about the timing of this. I agree it's hard for me to imagine that the new chief from Madison, Wisconsin would not at least give his boss a heads up that he's going to fire two pretty well-known and respected civilian leaders in the police department. And it being 7:30 the day after the election, of course, I don't entirely believe in coincidences as a reporter, so it does raise my spidey senses. I don't know for sure, though. But, I think doing this before the election has the risk of looking like yet more chaos in leadership at the police department.
Okay.
I know that I think the leadership in City Hall and the civilian leadership who is being dismissed did not always see eye to eye. There was some friction there too, and so it's a mayor or chief's prerogative to make a change. Of course, the timing of it certainly raises questions to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other factor here is the fact that when Barnes came in, he brought in, as I said, a lot of people from outside. They're all very, very high paid. He got a $50,000 bonus for bringing in some of these folks, as did his deputy chief, Yvonne Underwood. So, there's just a lot of money involved. And now there's too many people at that top executive level for the budget to really fund. So you've got a lot of people that are making a lot of money, but they're kind of floating. And budget-wise, Barnes does have to figure that out. And by eliminating two top executives, that frees up some money for some of these folks to become, essentially permanent. Okay. So I think there's a money factor at play too.
Okay.
It's very top-heavy at the moment.
All right, whether that's election related or not, I'll pause on elections for now, since there's still a lot we don't know. One more question, though, before I leave elections. When Trump was first elected, some left-wingers would say that, well, sadly, this is what the country needs to clarify the evils of capitalism and authoritarianism, and it's going to show how useless the corporate sellout Democratic Party is. We need to burn it down.
I can think of one leftist who was
I
saying
am
that.
Bill Shama Radke in this
I was
moment.
thinking Susan Sarandon.
I am Bill Susan Radke in the moment. This is going to ignite a socialist movement. And so I just wanted to ask, Zoran Mamdani, maybe Katie Wilson, is this, you said the pendulum will swing back, Erica, so you didn't seem to think this is just the beginning.
I think
of a
Seattle's
socialist movement.
Seattle's a centrist city that's dominated by homeowners who want things to stay the same, and I think that will remain true even if Katie Wilson becomes mayor. It's not as though the Seattle City Council is overwhelmingly led by people who are, democratic socialists, which Shama Sawant was not. It is still a very centrist city council as well.
So I think two things. One is I respectfully disagree with Erica. I don't think Seattle is a centrist city at all. I think it's a leftist city. And I think that 4 years ago, the public safety was such a horrible situation that they went and made some change now with Ann Davidson and Sarah Nelson and Mayor Harrell. But I think it's not a coincidence this happened in New York City and here. I think there is a reaction. I think that young people have grown up and they're seeing that they can't afford to buy a house in New York, in Seattle, in many cities. And they're upset about it and they're voting with those thoughts in mind.
I don't think young people could buy a house in 2019 or 2021 or 2023 either. And I am not a young person and I can't buy a house. I mean, I think that's becoming more of a universal experience for people who do not currently own homes. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's why affordability was such a big issue in this election. I think will continue to be so.
Yeah, both Harrell and Wilson seem to agree that Trump's presence made a difference in the race, but for slightly different reasons. Harrell's interpretation was basically he has made everybody so grumpy in Seattle that they're just looking for the nearest incumbent to take it out on, and that's me. I think that was an explanation that might have held some water. It also conveniently kind of let Harrell off the hook.
Do voters really think like that? I'm so grumpy.
Yeah.
I just want to, I don't care who's in office. Just kick the bums out. Do people really think that way?
Well, historically, that's correct. It doesn't mean it was correct here, but historically, people want to throw the bums out. It happens all the time.
I've heard the phrase. I just I can't relate to
Yeah,
that. Because I'm not the typical voter.
In Seattle, that historically has only been true of the mayor, really. We don't keep mayors. But we do have very long-term city council members. We do have typically long-term city attorneys. So I don't think we're historically a throw-the-bums-out city. Certainly we throw some bums out, and sometimes the bums deserve to be thrown out.
Well, and sometimes the bums leave themselves voluntarily or not. But then, Wilson's read on it was people are tired of the Democratic establishment, and they see Trump as being representative of that party's failings, and that Bruce Harrell, he's been in City Hall for 16 of the last 18 years. He enjoyed endorsements from pretty much the entire gamut of Democratic establishment politicians in Washington, and therefore, people are looking to take it out on the Democratic establishment. Harrell's your guy.
Yeah. Okay, this is your chance. If there's more you want to say, vital about this election, what we know and don't know.
Well, you mentioned money. You mentioned money, and I just do want to say that there was a ton of money spent in this election to support Bruce Harrell. I think there was a panic after the primary among business folks, real estate folks, who didn't think that Katie Wilson would do as well as she did. And it was a huge outpouring of corporate donations to a PAC that then sent out, just a ton of mailers. I think I have like a half-inch thick sheath of mailers, most of them from this PAC, to attack her. So I think that money also played a huge role in this election. Katie Wilson did not have as much money, and her labor PAC did not have as much money either.
Okay.
Yeah, the way in which ballots were submitted this time is different, which is interesting. I don't know how significant that is. It does, for me, put a little more uncertainty into what the results are going to be this afternoon on Monday, which is that a lot more people use drop boxes this time. So the fact that This was happening, I think, under the Trump administration. So there was already some built-in mistrust of how federal agencies were being run. And then, of course, during the federal shutdown, there was a lot of messages out there that don't mail your ballot, put it in the Dropbox. People appear to have taken.
I made two separate trips to the Dropbox.
There you go.
One for me and one for my wife.
Yes.
That's two.
Well, it was the USPS put out. I mean, I wrote about this, and I think the Seattle Times covered this too. The USPS put out information saying that they could not guarantee that
Yes.
ballots would be in on time. So,
Yes.
I mean, I think was a real risk. It wasn't just messaging and fear because of Trump and federal cuts.
Didn't mean to underplay that. But the data that King County Elections is putting out is showing that people really took that to heart. That the number of ballots that came in via the Dropbox were so much more. The result, though, for all of us frustrated electoral watchers, are a much slower count this year. And so usually we would have had a much clearer picture of what the results are going to be, and we just have not counted that many ballots because so many came in late on Election Day.
How about this? We all seem to think King County is going to have a new executive, probably well, they definitely will, but Gurmai Zahalai is looking, that's where the numbers are going.
Yes.
How will listeners notice the difference between
we're all moving.
Well, between the prior or his opponent.
Right. Constantine, Balducci, what's at stake? Gurmai Zahalai.
I mean, I think they're all policy-wise pretty comparable, to be honest. I mean, I think it's a matter of style and experience. And so Zahalai is beloved of progressives. I don't think that his policies are that different. The policies that he'll implement are that different than Claudia Balducci would have. But, but I think that, I mean, it's hard to answer that question because it's not as if there was a Republican running against a Democrat. It was two Democrats running against each other in a high-profile race in which they mostly agreed on things and really struggled to find those points of contrast and comparison.
Okay,
they found them, but there weren't that many.
I agree with Erica that there's not much difference, but he is a darling of the progressives, and he will find a way to raise our taxes.
He not alone, but the King County Council.
I think so.
Okay, but the elections were not the entire week, so I'm going to pound the table and say let's talk about something else after we take a break. We'll be right back.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books, with community bookstores in Lake Forest Park, Ravenna, and Seward Park, offering a wide selection of holiday gifts for the book lover, including new, used, and signed books, in-store or online at thirdplacebooks.com.
And from UW Medicine, where the same doctors caring for patients are also helping to advance medical research and teaching the next generation of physicians. More at uwmedicine.org. UW Medicine, a higher degree of healthcare.
Okay, team, we've got to focus here because we're back on the air with KUOW's Week in Review. Seattle Times City Hall reporter David Kroman, PubliCola co-founder and publisher Erica Barnett. Saul Gamoran ran Nikki Haley's campaign around here and now consults legally. Right.
That's correct.
Okay. So I said we're going to talk about some other stuff. Hundreds of thousands of Washingtonians missed their food stamp benefits this week. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to use emergency funding to pay full benefits, and the administration's appealing that ruling. Air traffic controllers are still unpaid. SeaTac Airport wants to help by collecting non-perishable food, personal hygiene items, and diapers for federal airport workers. The FAA is reducing flights at major airports by 10%, and that has meant some cancellations. I haven't been able to check in a while and see what life is like at the airport, but Weekend Review producer Kevin Kniestead is right by a microphone. Kevin, have you seen how things are going at SeaTac Airport?
I was just pulling that up, and sometimes I can read your mind, Bill, and sometimes no clue.
Yes, I understand. My wife would say the same.
28 cancellations, 93 delays, the bulk of which were Alaska, which is not a surprise because most of the bulk of the flights that go out of SeaTac are from Alaska.
Yeah.
No real waits at the Checkpoints, about 10 minutes max right now at any one of the checkpoints at SeaTac, so no real delays.
Okay.
And if you show up to the airport and there's long lines and your flight's canceled, my email address is bradke@kuow.org.
And don't park on the side of the road and flash your lights and wait. Just go to the cell phone lot. Is it that hard? Also, I read this in the Seattle Times. Thank you, Kevin, by the way. That was Kevin Kniestead. He knows stuff. I read in the Seattle Times that Ballard Locks Visitor Center and Fish Viewing Room are closed because of the shutdown. They're shut down. The locks are operating, obviously. Seattle's newest pro sports team has a name.
We are the Seattle Torrent.
The Seattle Torrent is our new pro women's hockey league team. These fans like the name.
Identifies us as coming from the Pacific Northwest. The rain, the weather. It's a great name.
Torrent is water, but also a torrent of rain, and we all know what that can do. That's strong. So I like that we have the weather connection.
What do you think? Seattle Torrent? Good name?
I mean, it makes me think of BitTorrent.
Yeah, that was my first reaction.
Yeah, I mean,
file sharing, peer-to-peer file sharing.
Yeah, torrent. I don't know. And for hockey, I mean, it's water. Do you want a torrent of water on an ice rink? I don't know.
Yeah, is the ice rink melting?
I'm excited to go to a game. I think it'll be great.
Where are they playing? Where do they play?
Where do they play?
No,
Climate Pledge? I don't know. I'm sorry.
Here
I
comes
don't- I
Kevin
should-
Kniestead.
Oh, yes. Kevin Kniestead, who, as I've
Me
told you,
again.
knows
They
stuff.
play at Climate Pledge.
Thank
They play
you.
at Climate Pledge,
Thank you, Kevin. Climate Pledge. We're obviously torrent works with the rain, torrential rain, Seattle rain. But between the torrent and the Seattle storm, we're really playing up a kind of rain that we don't actually have much here, right? It rarely torrentially.
Except the last week. It's been really torrential.
Is that a torrent?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a torrent?
Lightning and you didn't, yeah.
Okay. I think every place else I've lived is more torrential than Seattle.
That's true.
But what about this? Our rivals to be in pro hockey, women's hockey, is the Vancouver BC announced their team, and they are the Golden Eyes. What's the better name? What's the cooler name? Do you know what a Golden Eye is?
James Bond?
James Bond movie? Yes.
I know gold eye is like a kind of fish.
A gold eye is a fish. I didn't know that. Erica?
I don't know what a
Is it
golden
a
eye
bird? I don't know. I'm guessing.
It is a bird.
It's
A
a
golden
bird.
eye is a seabird. So there's sort of a Seahawk analogy, but unique to BC, apparently known for its yellow-hued eyes.
I think that's cooler.
Yeah, me too. I agree.
What's the mascot for the Seattle Torrent? I think the Torrentula, but I don't know how to work rain in there. The Seattle Times is changing how it spells Hawaii, which makes me want to pronounce it right. They're adding what in type you could call, it looks like a single open quote mark or like a backwards apostrophe, but it represents an okina, which is a pronunciation indicator for a glottal stop. So not Hawaii, Hawaii. Erica, how does PubliCola spell Hawaii?
Well, we don't typically because I
you
don't
report on Hawaii?
as a local news publication. We typically don't. I can't tell you how many times we've ever used that word, but if we do in the future, I will spell it correctly. I love diacritics.
Diacritic, good word.
And
that's one of those. That's like a circumflex or an okina, or right, one of those little.
I'm looking at you, Blanky. Yes, like an
accent,
umlaut.
Like an umlaut. I think that's
Or
a
a tilde,
diacritic.
yeah.
Accent aigu. Yeah.
And I like spelling things correctly in the way that people who are native to a place want them to be spelled.
Thank
you. I'm into it.
Okay.
I will be spelling it that way because I work at the Seattle Times, and that is now required of me.
Oh, well, it sounded very official.
I have no problem with
Why
changing.
are you reading from that piece of paper?
Yeah.
David?
Okay, very good. We're all on board. Seattle Public Schools has a new superintendent, assuming they can agree on contract terms. The board chose Ben Schuldener from the Lansing School District in Michigan. Schuldener jumped right into the fire with some highly controversial comments.
We're all in this together, and we have to break down the silos. We have to break down the walls.
Wow. That's going to alienate the Wall Builders Union right there. I would like to meet him. Maybe we'll be on the show sometime. Apparently, South Park smells like rotten eggs. This is a neighborhood near Boeing Field, across the Duwamish from Boeing Field. They're wondering why it smells like rotten eggs. And Paulina Lopez, Duwamish River Community Coalition, says we're filing complaints. Still the rotten egg smell.
I don't think if I would live in Magnolia, we would still have 2 months worth of this smell and not finding out what the heck is going on.
Yeah, there are a great number of immigrants and refugees and lower income folks in Duwamish who'd like to not smell like rotten eggs. Anything else to add? Anything I missed before we talk? I ask you what you smiled about? Okay, what made you smile this week?
Well, I went to a restaurant I'd never been to before in Bellevue. It's a northern Indian restaurant called Chutney's, and it was great.
Okay.
Loved it. Made me smile.
Northern Indian food in Bellevue. Thumbs up.
Oh, that actually reminds me so I'll have two things. We went to Misha this week in Fremont, which is an Indian restaurant, upscale Indian restaurant for Restaurant Week, and it was excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I'm excited about is that it's couch season, and the new Vince Gilligan of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, his show Pluribus is starting on Friday. It's a sci-fi mystery, and I'm really excited to watch it.
What's it about?
It's very unclear, Bill. It's about a woman.
It means many, right?
Yeah, it's about a woman who is played by Ray Seahorn, who is in this world where suddenly everybody is indescribably happy. She is not, and everybody wants her to be happy too. And so she's trying to get to the bottom of it.
There's a lot of hype about it. A lot of hype.
Really?
Yeah.
That's an awesome premise. Everybody smiled this week except her. David, what made you smile this week?
Well, mine's TV related too, which must be reflective of the winter and weather. But I'm a sucker for the Great British Bake Off, and finale is tonight. So
okay,
that makes me smile.
I might do that tonight.
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of baking, mine is that a Washington State pizza maker got top honors at the Pizza World Cup in Rome. How big a deal is this?
Oh, he's from Kingston, right?
Will Grant is from Kingston, the first American to ever receive the prestigious Premio Foley Lifetime Achievement Award for contributions to the pizza world. He owns Sourdough Willie's in Kingston and a Bainbridge Island place called That's a Some Pizza, which according to their website is the oldest continuously run restaurant on the island. From the day they opened, August 7th, 1984, they have used a 120-year-old sourdough starter from the Klondike Gold Rush. And although you might think it's cultural appropriation for a guy named Will Grant to have a restaurant called That's a Some Pizza, I say if the Pizza World Cup in Rome is cool with it, so am I. That made me smile.
I grew up on Bainbridge and live in Kingston. This guy has been a part of my life for many years, and his pizza, and it's not bad.
It's not bad. That's the
best you can say.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
That's a not bad.
I like it.
That's
fine.
your endorsement. Okay, that's an okay. That is David Kroman, Seattle Times City Hall. That's a Some City Hall reporter, if you ask me. Co-host of the Seattle News, Views, and Brews podcast. Thank you, David.
Thanks for having me.
Founder and president of Gamoran Legal Consulting. Thank you, Saul Gamoran.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Co-founder and publisher of PubliCola. She co-hosts the Seattle Nice podcast. Erica Barnett, great to see you.
Great to see you too.
All right, we're out. Kevin Kniestet, thank you for the producing and the information. Kathy Faulkner on the board making us sound great. Thank you, Juan Pablo Chiquiza and Hans Twite and Morgan White and my guests visiting the studio today. I'm Bill Radke. Remember, December 4th, Year in Review, Town Hall Seattle. See you there.